It's great to be in the SEC. Welcome back to the SEC Recap Podcast. I am Ben Warren, and this is episode number 14 of our 2026 SEC Team Preview Series, working through all 16 teams based on the preseason win totals from my SEC Precap model. Today, we reach Texas A&M, one of the three strongest teams in the conference by preseason expected wins, and one of the most interesting projection cases on the entire board, in my opinion. Now, last season, the Aggies broke through. They started 11-0, reached the college football playoff for the first time, and looked like a legitimate SEC title caliber team for most of the year. Now, that question changes a little bit for 2026. It's not, can Texas A&M take a big step? Can they make a jump? It is, can Texas A&M make that jump sustainable? And that's what you're looking for in any team trying to sustain excellence, trying to sustain success, right? And that's what this episode is really all about. We're going to take a look at the 2025 breakthrough, why the model says 9-3, even though the strict pick card suggests 10-2 as a possibility. We're going to look at how the schedule is structured, which games define the season, what Marcel Reed needs to be, and why Mike Elko has Texas A&M positioned to stay near the top of the league if the transition pieces come together quickly enough. Guys, thank you for being here on YouTube. If you're not already, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these full team previews and our weekly prediction and recap action once we get into the start of the season. And hit that notification bell. Don't want you to miss anything. We're covering all 16 teams. We've got 3 to go. We're almost there, almost into week 1. So let's dig into the Aggies schedule. Now, what I'm showing you here is my precap models, just straight prediction card. This is preseason data, right? You're going to see this change a little bit as we get into the week 1, week 2, week 3 action. But if you look at the strict game-by-game picks, that's this win-loss column here, you can see the model has A&M picked in 10 out of 12 games. It'd be 10-2. Outright favored in 10 of 12 games. Missouri State, Arizona State, Kentucky, LSU, Arkansas, Missouri, Citadel, South Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma. The only 2 games where Texas A&M is picked to lose right now are at Alabama and at home against Texas. Now, those are coincidentally like 2 of the teams I do have placed above Texas A&M in terms of win-loss totals. It doesn't mean those games are not winnable. It's just as the model is looking at the data here in the preseason, it sees those as the only 2 probabilistic losses. Now, if even half of these are close, like Alabama is only favored right now by about 3 points in my preseason projections, and Texas, I think, might even be closer at home in College Station. I think that game could be less than a field goal. So if you look at the card by itself, the obvious question is, why am I projecting Texas A&M to maybe finish 9-3 instead of 10-2? And that's because there's a huge difference in being outright favored in a number of games versus being expected to win that same number of games. In this case, being favored to win 10 games versus being expected to win 10 games. And it all has to do in how these probabilities sum. So if LSU is only a 61% win probability, Missouri 69, South Carolina 68, Tennessee 69, Oklahoma 68, the strict card turns every one of those into a win. But realistically, Texas A&M probably does not sweep all 5 of those games. They could, they absolutely could, but it's not likely. It's not probable. And the other side of that matters too. A&M still has about a 42% chance right now at Alabama, 46% chance against Texas. So the Aggies may drop one of the games they're supposed to win and then win one of the ones that it looks like they're supposed to lose. And that's why this season has such an interesting range. We're going to talk about it here as we get into the episode. The weekly card says 10-2. The full season model centers at about 9-3 with roughly 8.7 expected wins. And after Texas A&M started 11-0 and reached the college football playoff last season, the real question in 2026 is whether Mike Elko has built a program, I'm not going to say a team, a program capable of turning that 10-2 clean season card into a reality this year. It's going to be more difficult. It's going to be more difficult for everyone in the SEC because of that 9th conference game. So tough work cut out for everybody in the conference this year. Let's look at what happened in 2025. The Aggies finished at 11-2 overall, 7-1 in SEC play. They averaged 33.8 points and 444.5 yards per game, while allowing only 21 points and 307 yards. So really good on the defensive side of the ball. On a yards per play basis, they posted about 6.2. And for most of the year, looked like one of the most complete teams in the conference. They passed the eye test as well as the stat test. The season high is easy to identify. They opened 11-0. They won at Notre Dame, hammered LSU 49-25, and reached the CFP for the first time in program history. But the low was the ending. A 27-17 loss to Texas, followed by a 10-3 just defensive slugfest CFP loss to Miami. Now, the ending matters, but it shouldn't erase what the season represented. Elko and company proved that Texas A&M can field a disciplined, very physical, nationally relevant football team. The Aggies didn't just flash talent. They showed that it could translate into structure, consistency, very high-end, high-quality wins. Now, the 2026 conversation is not about rebuilding all of that from the middle. It's about reloading from that point of breakthrough. And that's a much better problem to have overall. But it creates pressure because once a program reaches this level, 9 wins can feel really solid, while 10 or 11 starts to feel like it should be the standard that everyone wants back immediately. And so that's why I'm cautious on all of these previews this year in the SEC, because that 9th conference game, the Power 4 non-conference requirement, we're going to have a lot of really good 8-4 football teams in the SEC this year. We simply are. Where in previous years, those might be a 9 or 10 win team. You've got to maybe lower what the ceiling is for a lot of these teams, while understanding that the caliber and the quality have not dropped off at all. So 9 should not feel like a step back for a team like Texas A&M. It's just that 10, 11, 12, what it takes to get there is so much more challenging. It's magnitudes more challenging. Let's look at the projection snapshot for 2026. Now, we showed you at the top of the show on that pick by pick, the game by game pick card. The Precap model right now projects Texas A&M at 9-3 overall. Your expected wins sit at 8.7. Projected SEC conference win expectation of about 6. And bowl odds at 98.7%. So very high floor for 6-win season. In the middle 80% range, as you see in the bottom right of the graphic here, runs from anywhere between 7 to 10. And that's a wide margin. We're going to talk about what it's going to take to hit the upside of that projection. What's it going to take to hit that 9-10 win mark? And at the same time, the weekly model picks say 10-2. So we're kind of establishing what we think the ceiling is with this type of schedule while looking at the gap, because that's the entire story. A&M is favored often enough to look like a double-digit win team when you scan the schedule one game at a time. You go, oh, yeah, win, 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 win. This one will be tough. This one will be tough. But the rest of these look like there's a lot of gimmies on the schedule. I think many of the advantages that you would see when scanning the schedule in that manner are more modest than overwhelming. That doesn't mean the model is low on A&M. Quite the opposite. A&M is a top 4 team in the SEC for me this year. They're like 3rd or 4th in the SEC by projected wins. Again, some of these teams are very, very close. And they clearly project as one of the league's upper tier teams. The point is simply that a strict pick card treats every game where the probability is better than 50% like a full win. And the season model is not going to give you that. So that's why the center pulls back towards 9-3 while the baseline stays really, really high. It's just not as clean as the raw 10-2 card makes it look. So where does that 10-2 number come from? Why is that not the expected? Again, look at how the probabilities sum. And I have it broken down into these tiers. So games that you should win, your bankables, that middle tier, games that can be challenging, and then games that you're going to be an underdog in. So if you look at all the games you should bank, Missouri State, Arizona State, Kentucky, Arkansas, Citadel, very high win probabilities. Your expected wins from those 5 games sum to about 4.59, 4.6. Then comes the middle tier: LSU, Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma, all respectable opponents, could give you a challenge. The probabilities are all between like 50 and 70%. So those 5 quote unquote wins contribute about only 3.2 expected wins when you sum those probabilities. And then finally, when you look at Alabama and Texas, less than 1 total expected win. So when you add all that up, 4.59 plus 3.24 plus 0.88, that gets you to 8.71 expected in the model. And that's why when we project, we're saying we're rounding that up. We're not going to round down to 8. I think the Aggies are better than 8. We're looking at 9 solidly. That's where we get the 9-3 projection from. Now, most importantly, what is it going to take to get 9 wins, to get 10 wins? That's what everyone wants to know, right? Not just the projection. What's got to happen for them to get there? And so this path graphic, again, we keep the bankable games and then the 7 that are really going to decide it. And it's a lot. Ordinarily, we've had these separated into 3 tiers where you've had a clear underdog tier. But the thing is, like, even the games that the Aggies might be underdogs in, it's going to be narrow. They really might be more like swing games than true underdogs, because I just think the Aggies are going to be pretty good this year. So it makes it pretty easy to start. Okay. You got your 5 bankables. You get those 5. Those you should handle solidly. Missouri State, Arizona State, Kentucky, Arkansas, Citadel. There's 5. Then, from the deciding 7, which is LSU, Missouri, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas. By the way, only 2 of those are at home. Tennessee, Texas are at home. Every single one of those SEC games is on the road. And I think that's why a lot of other analysts aren't as high on the Aggies. I think the Aggies are good enough to travel. I do. To reach 9-3, you got to go 4-3 in those 7. It's totally doable even with the road slate. To reach 10, obviously you've got to go 5-2, and then to push to 11, it has to go 6-1. Now that's where I have a hard time getting from 10 to 11, going 6-1 with road games at LSU, at Missouri, at Alabama, at South Carolina, at Oklahoma. I think that's too tough. But 4-3 to get to 9, 5-2 to get to 10 is doable. It's very doable. The framework is important because it shows how narrow the difference is between a very good season and an elite season. But we need to lower that ceiling, lower that standard, I think, for what an elite season is as far as win totals goes this year. If they simply defend the games where they're favored and split the biggest coin flips, then 10 wins is on the table immediately. But it's also going to show where that pressure is coming from. Once you treat the season as 5 bankable games plus 7 real tests, it becomes pretty clear that A&M can't afford sloppy execution in any of those middle tier games if you want that ceiling rather than the baseline. Guys, thank you again so much for being here on YouTube. While you're here, make sure you check out the Bonfire store, bonfire.com/store/SEC Recap. I've got my Saturdays merch, my SEC Pride merch, some bonus stuff on there as well. Stuff on there for every SEC fan base: t-shirts, long sleeves, hoodies. It all fits great, feels great. No ad reads on this podcast. I do this all for free in my spare time because I love college football and I love the SEC. So if you like the content, want to support the show, head on over to the Bonfire store, bonfire.com/store/SEC Recap. I'm giving away all my content for free this season, secrecap.com. It's all there for you. So the schedule is favorable in one sense and pretty demanding in the other. The favorable part is obvious, like those 5 games you're expected to win, and then being favored in 10 of the 12. But the demanding part we talked about is where those tests come and when they come. The Aggies go to LSU, to Missouri, to Bama, to South Carolina, to Oklahoma. And then the games that you're hosting are Tennessee, and Texas. That's a heavy, heavy load of real SEC and rivalry stress layered throughout the entire season. The schedule map classifies 5 of those games as bankable, 5 as pretty vulnerable, and 2 as upset shots. That would be at Alabama and versus Texas. Now, a key pivot might be the Oklahoma game, because I do think Oklahoma is going to be very good. I'm not as high on them as some other people. I'm not as high on Oklahoma as I am Ole Miss and A&M. But Oklahoma, that pivot point, maybe like less than a 60% win probability there as a swing game. There's a whole cluster of games that live in the same zone. And that's why the 9-3 center projection makes sense. It makes sense to me when I'm looking at it. So they don't need a miracle throughout the season to have a great year. You just need to cash those games that you should. And then don't let those games where you could be vulnerable, those swings, turn into 2 or 3 losses instead of just 1. Okay. So here are the 4 it comes down to, I think, your true swings. It's going to be these 4 that stand out as season definers. Number 1, LSU, where I've got you preseason as a 61% favorite. That would be an early road statement. Okay. Win in Baton Rouge, you immediately validate that last year's breakthrough was not a one-off. Second swing game for me is going to be at Alabama. Again, road test. I think if the Aggies are an underdog, it'll be slight. And this is not a required win either for me as the baseline, but it's one that if you steal in Bryant-Denny, then playoff level season starts to happen. Okay. That's a CFP win. Third is Oklahoma. And I think that's going to be one of the last big road tests before the regular season finish. Got A&M favored in that game. Again, it'll be more of a coin flip. That's why it's a swing, which means it's exactly the kind of game that could either preserve that 9-3 floor, or it can quietly kind of pull you down to 8 wins instead of hitting at 9. And then you have Texas. Now, the graphic is going to call this rivalry game a coin flip. I think that's exactly what it is. At 46%, Texas A&M, it's close enough. It's at home. That this can swing the national perception of the whole season. Again, this would be a CFP win. We wouldn't be having any conversation about Aggies getting in, even at 9-3, I think, with a win over Texas, because I do think Texas is going to be one of the best 2 teams in the SEC this year. But you go 3-1 across these 4. You don't have to win all of them. Playoff push is very real. If you split them like 2-2, I think 9-3 stays your center. If you somehow flub it and go 3-1, then even at 8-4, you're going to feel like you really underachieved for the 2026 season. Let me give you my 3 keys on how the Aggies can beat that 9-win center. And then we'll break down the personnel who I think are going to be the biggest upside variables in making that happen. Number 1, obviously it's Marcel Reed. He's got to take another step. He's already proven. What Texas A&M needs now is a cleaner, steadier, more efficient version of that quarterback across the entire season. Second key, rebuilding the support around him. Offensive line, receiver hierarchy have to replace some lost star production without lowering the offense's week-to-week reliability. It's not enough to have athletes anymore. The support pieces have to function consistently enough that Reed does not have to solve every problem himself. You can't expect him to bail you out of every situation. The third key is replacing some defensive havoc. And I love looking at havoc metrics. Elko's defense got to stay disruptive. You got to stay disruptive even after you have some big departures across the front 7 in your linebacker core. You're not starting over. They don't need to start over, but it needs that new core to scale pretty fast, and they don't have a lot of time to figure it out. You've got a little time. You got Missouri State, Arizona State, Kentucky at home. Then you go to LSU in week 4, and then you're into conference play. Arkansas at Missouri, Citadel, Alabama before you get that bye. So they don't have to gel like by week 1, but week 3, week 4, we definitely need to know what they're going to be the rest of the season. Let's talk about it. Key number one, Marcel Reed. Biggest reason I think Texas A&M has a legitimate chance to beat the 9-win center, it's this guy. Last season, in his first full year as the unquestioned starter, he completed 62.1% of his passes for 3,100 yards, 3,169. 25 touchdowns, 12 INTs. You'd like to see that number come down a little bit with some cleaner decision-making, but he added 493 rushing yards, 6 more touchdowns, so 3,662 yards total offense. And it's that ceiling that the Aggies are going to need this year. And last year, it showed up in huge places. He threw for 439 yards against South Carolina. That was a game, by the way, South Carolina had the Aggies on the ropes the entire time, and Aggies marched back in a big way. That was a big-time comeback. It was a game they never should have been down in, by the way. But it speaks to the challenges that you're going to face in the SEC week in, week out. He ran for 108 yards against LSU. He accounted for 4 touchdowns against LSU, 4 against Arkansas, 4 in the opener against UTSA. He produced 11 completions of at least 40 yards over the course of the season. No question that he can make big plays. We all know he can. It's whether he can make the offense less volatile, less of the ups and the downs, more of the consistency. 25 passing touchdowns against 12 interceptions is good production, but on this particular schedule, the difference between 9-3 and 10-2 may come down to 2 possessions at LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, or Texas. So don't stop being aggressive. Be aggressive. His legs and his ability to create outside structure are part of what makes this offense so difficult to defend. It's part of what's going to give a lot of these other teams trouble. They need him to become better at knowing when not to force the hero ball. If that completion percentage can creep up a little bit, turnovers can come down, explosive plays remain, you suddenly have a quarterback going for 3,500 yards of offense, fewer empty possessions. That's how you get from 9 wins to playoff ceiling. And it's another reason I like the upside here. Reed is no longer learning how to be the guy. He already had a full season. He played in the playoff, won big road games. He knows what it's like when the offense has to chase a game late. So it's about refining. It truly is about refining rather than reinforcing. Another person I like in this offense, Mario Craver, wide receiver. They're not starting over. He's coming back to you after catching 59 passes for 917 yards and 4 touchdowns last season. He averaged 15.5 yards per catch, finished 6th in the SEC in receiving yards, and was a Biletnikoff semifinalist. Second team All-American. The Notre Dame game showed you exactly what his potential is. He went for 207, including an 86-yard touchdown from Reed. I think that was the longest A&M play from scrimmage all season. And then across the year, 15 plays of 20 yards or more between rushing and receiving. So you're not trying to, again, develop a number one. I think you got it. But you've got to build a little bit of a hierarchy behind it. Who's that going to be? Terry Busey? I don't know how you say his last name, sorry. Very dynamic athlete. Had just 18 receptions last year. But he also handled some kicks and punts. He had some big plays, some 20-yard plays, okay? Isaiah Horton, 6'4" target, big guy, long wingspan, big catch radius, and enough bodies that the OC, Wiggins, should be able to vary up some personnel rather than ask Craver to carry the passing game by himself. But I expect Craver to become that dependable target. I care about really, that's what I care about more than the raw depth or the depth chart is who is that dependable second and third answer. If it's, Horton or Bussey, then A&M is going to be much harder to defend. And then, Reed and Craver already have proof of concept together. Just make that a weekly staple. Make that a weekly foundation. I just noticed here, Mario Craver's not a transfer edition. I think that was a holdout from a different graphic, just explaining something on screen here. He transferred to A&M before 2025. He's a returning wide receiver. So if you're looking at this on screen and wondering why it says transfer edition here, my bad. I think that was just a holdover from a different card. All right, moving on to the defensive side of the ball. I like this guy a lot. DJ Hicks, defensive tackle. Recognizable name. He was an elite recruit. Last season produced 26 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, despite only starting 2 games and playing 422 snaps. For his career, he already has 11 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. He's going to come into 2026 on a lot of award watch lists, I think, and preseason All-SEC defensive lineman. So very important role here. Production rate was already there. Snap count, responsibility go up. They need him to become a guy that opposing offensive lines actually have to build protection plans around. That's going to change everything for an Elko defense because interior disruption, again, havoc, creates pressure without forcing you to send extra bodies, without having to send linebackers. Another guy I like, hold on. Oh, he's right here. Dalton Brooks, safety, gives you something completely different. Veteran production, versatility. He's third on the team last season with 62 tackles, but also had 6.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, an interception, forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, 12 tackles against Texas, forced fumble against Miami in the playoff game. So for his career, he's already at 139 tackles and 13 tackles for loss. He enters 2026 as a returning starter, and I think team captain might check me on that. There's a lot of different ways to affect a game from a safety position. And new DC can install calls, but a veteran safety has to make sure everybody's lined up correctly when LSU is changing formations with 12 seconds left on the play clock and an experienced quarterback on the other side of that ball, right? That's the kind of hidden value, hidden continuity that a player like Brooks is going to give you. The 2025 version of this defense was very disruptive. They didn't really need the offense to be perfect. I think the offense is going to be better this year. The defense needs to not take a huge step back. So you need these veteran guys to keep everything organized, preserve that same basic formula, even though you're going to have a little bit different personnel on that side of the ball. Ultimately, the biggest reason I'm comfortable projecting Texas A&M this high is Mike Elko. Through 2 seasons, he's 19-7, second best 2-year start by a head coach in Texas A&M history. Last year produced the 11-2 record, program's first CFP appearance and first 10-win season since 2012. A&M has also beaten 5 ranked teams under Elko, including 3 top 10 opponents. That's the bar that you're looking for. It's not enough that we would say they're bulletproof, but it's enough evidence to say that that improvement is not happening by accident. Aggies play with a recognizable identity now. Physical, organized, you got to earn it. They're going to make anybody earn it. Interesting part of 2026 is that Elko has to preserve that while replacing coordinators. So on the offensive side of the ball, Holmon Wiggins, he's going to be calling the offense, but he's not really an outsider. He spent the previous 2 seasons as A&M's co-offensive OC, wide receivers coach, before being promoted. Before that, he spent years at Alabama, I think about 5 years. Receiver resume includes players like Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Jamison Williams, some notable names in the receiver room. And he also has a direct connection to this roster. He helped bring both Craver and KC Concepcion to A&M, coached them to all SEC seasons. That receiver core was averaging 14.1 yards per catch last year when he was promoted, and they're ranking 11th nationally at that point. So when we talk about Reed needing a better passing game structure, this is not an arbitrary promotion role. I don't think it was just that he was the next logical guy. He was the most logical guy. His background is specifically in developing the part of the offense that has the most room to make A&M and Marcel Reed far more dangerous in 2026. But the challenge is now a little bit bigger for him because he owns the whole offense rather than just what's happening in the receiver room. Lyle Hemphill is a similar story defensively. He was already on A&M staff. His relationship with Elko goes all the way back to Hofstra in the mid-2000s. Worked with him at Duke, where he became Elko's co-DC. And Hemphill's resume gives you a pretty clear idea of what he likes to do. At JMU, James Madison, 2024, he led the country in turnover margin, finished 6th nationally in sacks per game and 7th in interceptions. At Duke, 2023, that defense finished 16th nationally in scoring defense. Now, that fits what Texas A&M needs. Not conservative. Don't be a conservative defense just because some of last year's production in the havoc category walked out the door. Preserve the aggression while keeping the structure sound. And you have some additional continuity around both of these coordinators. Travis Williams remains an associate head coach for defense and linebackers. Elijah Robinson, co-DC coordinator and defensive line coach. Adam Cushing for the run game and offensive line. So it's not a new staff. There's a lot of chemistry with this staff, just new play callers inside an established program. But it matters. It matters. We have to talk about it. If Wiggins gets a little bit more efficiency out of Reed in the passing game, Hemphill keeps the defensive side of the ball disruptive, then I think things kind of continue right where they left off. That's why 10 wins remains very much in play for me for the 2026 season. So let me give you my final outlook and talk about the floor, the projection, and the ceiling. The floor for the Aggies is 7-5. Okay. The floor is 7-5. That outcome would mean that you lose multiple swing games. You fail to steal Alabama or Texas. And it's not the most likely. I don't expect this to happen, but it's the bottom edge of this realistic range that we're breaking down. And there's simply too many medium confidence games to call this season a gimme. The projection, the true model projection, and I agree with this projection, is 9-3. I know that's going to be high for a lot of people out there. But you bank the sure wins. You go 4-3 in the deciding 7, and that lands you right on the model center. And that's why I think 9-3 is the baseline. Despite so many of those games being on the road in the SEC, I still think there's 4 winnable games in there to get you to 9 wins. It reflects a very good team that still has 1 or 2 Saturdays likely to slip away. Now, the ceiling is 10-2. It's not 11-1 and it's not 12-0. The ceiling is 10-2. That's the cleanest version where Texas A&M wins every projected favorite. Maybe you lose just to Alabama or Texas, or you win at Alabama, but you lose to Oklahoma, right? Or you lose at LSU. The Aggies steal one of those two. Now you're talking about an even bigger season, but I'm not willing to go there. And that's a stretch from what the model sees as well. Getting to 11 wins, I think 10-2 is your ceiling. So this is not a low ceiling projection at all. 10-2 means high quality team, realistic playoff adjacent path, but you've got to earn it by converting in that middle tier rather than just assuming that it's going to be handed to you. So my final verdict is Texas A&M Aggies 9-3 overall, 6-3 in SEC play. And this is a strong projection and the correct one. The strict 10-2 card tells you the Aggies have a real clean season ceiling. The 8.72 expected wins tell you that the season is still likely to surrender one of those medium conference games somewhere along the way. The upside variable is very clear. Reed plus the receiver hierarchy, if that pairing becomes more efficient and the defense keeps the disruption level high, A&M can absolutely beat the baseline. The key swing variable on the schedule is Texas at 46%, but Alabama, LSU, Oklahoma all matter in similar ways because they're going to determine how often A&M cashes in on that middle tier versus ascending beyond it. The most important big picture takeaway is this. Texas A&M no longer needs to prove it belongs in the contender conversation. It already proved that in 2025. Now you have to prove that you can live there consistently. My final verdict, Texas A&M is good enough to stay in the upper tier of the SEC, dangerous enough to threaten more, and stable enough that 9-3 is a credible baseline rather than a best case scenario. Texas A&M Aggies 9-3 overall, 6-3 in the SEC. That's the Texas A&M preview. Guys, stay tuned. We've got 3 more teams to cover. Subscribe to the SEC Recap. Visit secrecap.com for the full preseason projection board. And let me know where you think the Aggies can turn last year's college football playoff breakthrough into another double-digit win season. Until then, it's great to be in the SEC. Stay tuned for the next episode. We're going to be talking about Alabama Crimson Tide. Have a good one. Peace.